Philadelphia Eagles select Devontae Smith, wide receiver, Alabama.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to Party on Broad. Guys, this is our Sixers second half of the season preview. We're going to be breaking down everything James Harden, everything Joel Embiid. The Sixers are the best team in the Eastern Conference. Let's freaking go. Today, we're breaking it all down. To help me do that, I've got my co-host. He is Rob Lange. Follow him on Twitter at Philly_Madness. What is good, Rob?
I've never been more excited for a second half of a to start. And I feel like, is there always a week off in between? Like, it's just like crazy to me. I mean, it's actually probably benefiting them, but I'm like, dude, just get me to Friday. I'm going to be up in the Poconos, so I don't even know if I'm going to get the game. So my phone and YouTube TV will be my best friend at about 7 o'clock on Friday. So I'm pumped.
Wow, man, I would be having a panic attack right now if I were you, for sure.
Yeah. I'll just have an alcoholic beverage and my YouTube TV rolling, and we'll be good to go.
That works. Also joining us, my man, Austin, at NBA Crow on Twitter. He covers USA Today. He covers the beat for the Painted Lines, among many, many other things, especially Chick-fil-A. What's up, Austin?
What's going on, guys? I actually had a flight scheduled for Friday night, and I had to rebook it. I was like, I can't be in the air right now. So
that's great.
Yeah, I mean, usually I would just say, like, you know what, I can probably skip covering a game, but I was like, you can't skip the Harden debut.
That's terrific. I love it. And then finally, we've got my man of the Tough Cover podcast of Chalk Talk. You can find him on Fox Sports The Gambler, you name it. He is Mark Henry at Mark Henry Jr. _. What's up, man?
I'm excited, man. I echo the sentiments of you guys. It does seem like, we've had to wait a year since the trade happened, but, it's only been, week and a half, a week? I don't even know. Time is a flat circle. It's a man-made construct anyway. But it feels like it has been forever ago since we traded for James Harden. So I'm ready to see this guy get on the floor. I think just as much as anybody, best Sixers guard in history hasn't played a game for the Sixers yet. So I'd like to see him. I'd like to see him get out there.
Yeah, let's jump right in. Guys, if you're watching us live, make sure you comment, react with us, talk about your expectations for the Sixers moving forward, and always smash that subscribe button, hit the like button if you love the Philadelphia 76ers. Let's start off, man. Just start off easy. Let's break down James Harden's impact with the Philadelphia 76ers. I'm going to let you go first, Rob. You're up, man.
Well, I mean, listen, we have said I feel like since Joel became in this league, we need another star. You thought maybe the guy that's now in Brooklyn was it. He wasn't. So it's put up or shut up time for this team. I mean, it really is. And I'm not saying game one, they got to come out and score 80 points between the two of them and just not. But as far as this season, next season, it's put up or shut up time, right? The process is done now. We've got the two stars. We got two top 10, 15 players in the league on the same roster. So what I'm really interested to see is how does Doc adjust the lineups? You got to stagger, right? Like you have to. And I feel like we've said that before and he hasn't. But I feel like that's the one thing that I'm really focused on looking for. And I know that everyone is saying, wow, the bench production isn't a big deal. No, it is. And I'm still a little leery that Furkan Korkmaz is getting big minutes. I'm very leery of that. I'm really hoping that something in the buyout market comes into play and that Cauley-Stein is not our only saving grace move on the 10-day contract.
All right, so Rob is looking at Doc's rotations. What are you looking at? Break down James Harden's impact. What do you expect, Austin?
Well, I mean, he is it's a bit of a clunky fit, but he also plugs in so many holes like this team has. Like he's only played 13 possessions against his own this year, but he scored, I think, 1.2 points per possession, which is like 83rd percentile in the NBA. So that's elite. His isolation scoring is 1.057 points per possession, and like across the board, he's good on spot ups, good on handoffs, good on isolation. his pick and roll has been more average this season. But I think that might be more of a function of, not having like a consistent pick and roll partner. But I think across the board, he's an elite shot creator. He's one of the, maybe the best isolation scorer in NBA history. And the Sixers went from having nobody that could create shots to having Tyrese Maxey and having the best shot creator of all time. So it's a pretty big change in terms of how your team is constructed. I'm very interested to see how this all plays out. I will say it's definitely been a longer week than most All-Star breaks are, because I am just very intrigued by how this whole situation is going to work and who's going to do what.
Absolutely. Quentin says, will we see new plays, or will we see classic Doc stand around, raise his arms up, yell at everything, but not do anything at the same time? Probably not, but we'll see. What about you, Mark? What are your expectations for James Harden's impact?
Well, expectations I'll get into, but the first thing that comes into my brain is you watch that video that everyone watched when he first got here and he first started practicing with the team with Harden and Maxey, shooting, off the dribble threes, doing crazy dribble moves into those threes. And it's like, for how long did the Philadelphia 76ers go without one guy who could do that? And now having two guys who can do that you're able to stagger. It's dumbfounding how much more dribbling and how much more passing ability James Harden adds to a team that we got lucky and lucked into Tyrese Maxey a little bit in terms of him being a 21st pick and being a piece that we now feel like is the third piece, probably. I mean, we can debate whether it's him or Tobias, I guess, but I think James Harden helps literally everyone in the Sixers lineup besides, maybe Joel Embiid. He's going to help Joel Embiid be a better player. He's going to help Joel Embiid, be a more likely, and not MVP, but a more likely championship player. You might hurt his MVP chances is actually what I meant to say there. But when you look at Matisse Thybulle, I think having his, impact defensively out there is going to be huge next to James Harden, and the negatives that he brings on offense, those tweets going around like the Maxey, Curry, Matisse, Tobias, Joel lineup is like a -13 net. Those things are less of an issue when you plug in James Harden's shot creation for Seth Curry. That is a huge difference that you really can't make a big enough deal of. And I love Seth Curry. And I mentioned we haven't had guys who can do what Harden and Maxey can do in forever before they both got here. We had like the Seth Curry Joel 2-man game. We had the JJ Redick Joel 2-man game, and we thought that was like innovative offensive basketball. And now you have James Harden, who everyone out there outside of Philly, it turned into, all 9 months that we held on to Ben Simmons, people were yelling at people like Krell when he wrote articles praising Daryl and how he was handling it, saying, oh, they should take Harrison Barnes, or they should take OG Anunoby. They should take all of these mid-level guys. But then when we trade for James Harden, all of a sudden it's a win of a trade for the Nets, and all of a sudden we got that value. It's an absurd conversation. It's just something that people want to throw out there now that Ben's on a good team with Kevin Durant, and they want to root for that team with Kevin Durant. But everyone that's using that argument is saying, oh, James Harden's washed. James Harden isn't the same player he was a couple of years ago. If we're saying 23, 10, and 8 on close to the league lead in assists is washed, I'll take a washed James Harden every single day. This is a guy last year, even if you want to go to last year, he was averaging 25, 11, and 8. This is an all-time player. 3 years ago, I did. Sorry, I'm not going to talk too much. I'll shut up after this. But 3 years ago on my podcast, before I was on the Painted Lines, I did a top 40 post-ABA merger of all time. I had James Harden 23rd. So that's post-1970s. I forgot the exact year, but post mid 1970s, I had him as the 23rd best player of all time since then, and that's 3 years ago. So, this is a top 25 player of all time in terms of modern history.
Mark touched on something I want to ask the people, because it's typically the same people are saying that the Sixers should get whatever they want, are now the people saying that the Nets won the trade. So the question to them, right, the Harrison Barnes, Buddy Hield trade people, is who would you rather have, Harrison Barnes and Buddy Hield or James Harden? I don't think everything.
The problem is you'd rather have Harrison Barnes, Buddy Hield.
Well, then they don't know shit. It's just stupid. Come on, it's like everyone, they're not going to get a top player. Then they get a top player, and it's not the good top player that they wanted. I'm flabbergasted by some fans that just can't get out of their own way with stupidity.
Yeah, for me, my first thought with James Harden, there's a lot of ways James Harden fits with the Sixers, but for me, it's clutch scoring. It's absolutely clutch scoring. When you look at that second the semifinals of the playoffs last year against the Atlanta Hawks, you know what the team net was in that series? A negative 31.1. During clutch situations. You look at
How could we forget that? Wow.
Yeah. James Harden, man, the Sixers finally got a closer, especially from the perimeter. They finally got a guy who isn't afraid to dunk a basketball with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, in the second round of a playoff game, game 7, just saying. But you look at the Sixers this season, 106.3 offensive rating in clutch situations this year. While James Harden has an off year, the dude is a 13.3 net in clutch situations. Having someone not named Joel Embiid that can get the ball in the basket is probably going to even help Joel Embiid this much defensively as well. Having a guy take that offensive load off of him is going to have a trickle-down effect on not just Joel Embiid, but for the rest of this roster. For me, I go to clutch situations. Before we move on to the next point, does anybody have any final thoughts about James Harden's impact?
It's kind of weird that the Sixers just are finding out now that it's legal to have multiple guys who can dribble.
What dribble? What is that? What does that mean?
Tyrese Maxey is enrolled into James Harden University and he's taking honors classes.
It's like some janitor in the practice facility was cleaning out a closet and found a rule book. Was like, oh, we can have more of these guys. Wow, I never knew that. Someone should tell them that. Guys, look what I found. There's a rule in the rule book that says they can have multiple guys who can dribble and shoot and maybe even pass the ball while they dribble or in the same motion. How incredible is that? And then they're like, whoa, shit, we can do more things now.
And while I respect Seth Curry so much, I'm somewhat glad to kind of see him move on. Doc won't have to rely on that Joel Seth Curry two-man game. Maybe we'll get Tyrese Maxey minutes on that second unit for once. Does anybody think that is going to happen here? Because the Sixers bench is among the last in the league in scoring.
I wouldn't start Tyrese.
I'm with Austin.
I'm with you there. I'm with you.
I'm with Austin. I don't know if he's going to do that, but I do believe with this team the way it is, that either Tyrese, James, or Joel have to be on the court at all times. And I know he's going to do it. Listen, I'm already preparing myself for Friday to see the all-bench lineup and not have one of those three guys out there and just want to smack myself in the face over it. But to me, they're the three guys, because I know that he'll say, well, I'm going to put Tobias out there, but they're the three guys I'm looking at right now. And I know it's a lot to put on a kid like Tyrese Maxey, but listen, you traded Seth Curry. Like you just said, Dives, this to me screams more Maxey minutes. And, I want to see what Maxey, Harden, and Embiid can do together at times, most of the end of the game. But, one of those guys has to be on the floor at all times. You got to stagger it.
Time is now, Doc. We're watching you, man. Time is now. Quentin says Brick Curry was good but too small. And
whoa. Brick Curry. Really?
Yeah.
Really?
He literally had one bad month. Come on.
We forget that he was maybe outside of Joel, the best player against Atlanta last year and carried the team early in the season when they couldn't score. Come on, people. See, I just get mad at people.
All right, I have a question for you guys.
I don't listen to the fans. I keep it strictly to who I follow and who follows me. And if I have first year people chiming in, I just block them out.
Would you guys have rather traded Matisse or Seth Curry in that trade?
I think
I was hoping for Seth. I
think Seth is a casualty that you must have.
I would have done Matisse, by the way, for what it's worth. If it was,
no. I'm with Mark. I was on the Matisse. I was on the trade Matisse bandwagon, and I think just because I understood. But the more I looked at it, you add Matisse and Ben's defense to that team, it really is going to limit you in a playoff series. But I don't know. I just fell in love with the idea of the Seth Curry shooter with all the spacing that having these two guys could create. But sure. I understand what Austin says is exactly right. I think Seth was the guy that had to fall on the sword for this one to really go down. So you could at least have the defense of Matisse. But my God, if I see another 0 for 6 game from 3, it's like cringeworthy sometimes when he shoots right now. I feel so bad.
Well,
Yeah.
we'll always have the NBA draft night when the Sixers in the second round traded for Seth Curry, and we were all celebrating and having drinks. Never forget that. That was so much fun.
For the record, I just would, on my stance on it was get Harden no matter the cost. Like,
Yeah.
I was willing to I was willing to do whatever it took to get that done. But I think there's arguments on both sides of whether or not they should have kept Seth or whether or not they should have kept Matisse. Or, Brooklyn might have wanted Seth instead of Matisse. We have no idea how those conversations went, I guess. But I do think that's just an interesting thought experiment.
My favorite was like people failing to realize that like Seth Curry is only under contract for, I think, the same amount of time that Harden is under contract if Harden opts in, so like another season, and he was making $8 million. You realistically were not going to extend him because he was going to ask for probably more than $8 million. So were you really not going to make a trade because of Seth Curry, who then you were going to let walk into it in like a year and a half anyway? Like let's be a little bit real here and not be so like insane. I'm glad.
I totally agree.
I'm glad that fans from Fishtown don't run the team.
All right, let's roll on.
Sorry to anybody from Fishtown, although I'm not that sorry.
Ricochet shot at Fishtown there. Jeez.
Yeah.
All right, let's roll on to our next segment here. And that is, are the Sixers the team to beat in the Eastern Conference? Let's start off with you, Mark. Where do the Sixers stand? Where do you expect them to finish here in the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, for the East, I mean, it sucks that this didn't happen last year. I think that's my number one thought because I do think that the East was wide open last year. Even as we were constructed last year, I still think it was wide open. But I really wish that we would have had James Harden last year because I do think that we are in the tougher conference in 2022. I think the East is much better than the West, or at least much deeper than the West. I don't think there's going to be a lot of first round series that are easy for anyone. You look at how it's, how it's a funny comment.
Oh, sorry, Quentin.
That's funny. It's just Austin. You can blame Austin for that.
Hey, they've got a great concert venue. I'll give them that.
This is what I do. I come in here, I insult people, and then I leave, and I don't come back.
Hey, that area is booming right now. That is definitely booming.
But if you just pull up, I'm a gambling guy. Everyone knows that. Tough Cover Podcast. And our general manager, Daryl Morey. I can't believe I just messed up his name. Daryl Morey. He's not a gambling guy, but he does sure like to reference, title odds. And he keeps talking about the Sixers title odds and how they increased exponentially. And you even boiled that down from the title odds. You look at the conference right now. The Brooklyn Nets are plus 275. The Milwaukee Bucks are plus 275. And the Philadelphia 76ers are plus 300. That basically tells you that Vegas thinks these three teams are just about as likely as each other. They can't really split the difference between Brooklyn, Milwaukee, and Philadelphia. For me, I would take Brooklyn out of that. I think there's a lot of question marks with Brooklyn with in terms of, is Kyrie going to be able to stay healthy? Is KD going to be able to stay healthy? How will Ben inclement into that team? Do they have anyone for Embiid in the playoffs? I do think that there's a lot of questions about Brooklyn, more questions than there are about Milwaukee, Miami, or even us. So I think they're a little bit lower than that tier for me. But I do think it's going to come down to Milwaukee and Philly, and it's hard not to look at that last Bucks game, even without James Harden, and at least feel a little confident because we were able to beat them without James Harden. Not that that's, that game means anything for the playoffs, but it is something to point to and feel a little better about yourselves than you would without that win. And, we were a 7-point underdog in that game. We won outright. I thought it was going to be a game, especially after the Celtics performance, that they were blown out by the Bucks. So it was good to see that matchup wasn't a nightmare quite yet, and Joel Embiid was able to get his. So I think that's going to be our main competition. I mean, I think Toronto would be a brutal team to match up with in a series. I think Boston's always annoying. The Cavs are really pesky. The Bulls, who knows what they are, and they're kind of this is the first year that nucleus has been together. They have been really successful, but the East is wide open. I would say that Philly is right there with Milwaukee as, in my opinion, the two most likely teams to win the East. But I've said it many times. I'm going to say this and then hop out because I got to jump out of here. I've said many times, this Phoenix Suns team, in my opinion, is the best NBA team since the KD Warriors. Chris Paul's injury does jumble that up a little bit. Maybe he's not going to be back until right around playoff time, so that does affect their chemistry. To me, I'm kind of thinking of the East as playing to lose to the Suns a little bit. But when you have James Harden and Joel Embiid, you probably should feel like you can beat anyone in the NBA. So I think the Suns are winning the NBA Finals. But if you put a gun to my head, I'm picking the Sixers. I really do think the Sixers win the East, and I'm not as concerned about the depth as a lot of people. I think if Furkan just shoots 34% from three and just doesn't kill you, like what he's shooting right now from three is just like he's not even close to playable. But he was absolutely playable last year at 40% from three. And if he can just get to average, just get to 36% from three, I don't think he absolutely kills you for 15 minutes a game. And I think the backup point guard role for him was completely ridiculous. And having Maxey and Harden, like we said, stagger. So 48 minutes of point guard of Harden and Maxey erases a lot of the problems with the bench. And, I think Andre Drummond, like we mentioned with Seth Curry, is a casualty. I do think one of Willie Cauley-Stein, Paul Millsap, Bassie, Paul Reed, one of them will figure it out as a 10 minutes, 12 minutes per game backup big in the playoffs with Harden. So Sixers to the finals. I think they losing 5 to Phoenix. That's my prediction.
Before you leave, Mark, last question, and I'll ask this to everyone before we head out here. How far does Doc Rivers have to go in this year's playoffs in order to come back for next year? Does it matter? What is your quick, rapid thought?
I think he'll be back next year almost no matter what. If I had to guess, I think it would probably take yet another, another one after this. I think it would probably take 3 76ers playoff collapses for Doc Rivers to get the boot. He does have a pretty big contract for a head coach. So, Josh Harris has been willing to spend. You can't kill the ownership anymore. They have been willing to spend. So maybe they would do something about it. And maybe the presence of James Harden does bring up the guy that I initially wanted when we hired Doc Rivers, Mike D'Antoni. Maybe that rumor will definitely be out there as soon as Doc loses. But unless they flame out in the first round or unless they blow a 3-0 lead, I really don't see Doc getting fired. But, if they don't get to the conference finals, I'll be screaming from a rooftop somewhere that they should fire him, but they probably won't.
All right. Thanks for joining, Mark. Thank you so much, man. Team Lou says, remember when we got Chris Webber to pair with Allen Iverson? I was in college. I literally remember staying up till like 2 a.m. when they made that trade, convincing myself that the Sixers, it could happen. Oh, that was a disaster. Absolute disaster. What about you, Austin? What's your take? Where do the Sixers now fall in the Eastern Conference?
I don't know. I don't know. I think it's just like I have a hard time seeing them anywhere but the second round because I've never seen them beyond the second round. So I think that's kind of like where I sit. I will say this: I think this idea that like it's open more now than it was last year than it ever will be. The NBA, if we've learned anything, is a revolving door of change. What's true today is not true tomorrow necessarily, and there could be a paradigm shift in some way next season that opens the door again, or makes it closes it further, or keeps it the same. Who knows? But you're never quite out of it in this league. And in terms of where Doc stands, I think internally they're probably pretty happy with everything that he's done. And I would expect, unless they lose in the first round in some catastrophic event, I would think he would still be back.
All right. What about you, Rob?
Yeah,
never mind. I won't say it. Never mind.
When I look at the Eastern Conference, I look at things now as like a best of 7 series when you want to say who's the best, because that's what it's going to be in the playoffs. And on today, February 23rd, I don't know if I could say that I have all the faith in the world that this 76ers team, without seeing them play with this new lineup, can beat a Bucks in 7. I know that, yes, the Nets have questions, but some of these questions look to be getting alleviated. The mask mandate looks like that's going to be lifted in a few weeks. Ben Simmons is going to be the ultimate question mark. Who is he? Is his mental health really still affecting him, whatever it may be? I think a question no one talks about is KD's health. This is not something new. The guy's getting hurt constantly. He's a thin dude on that leg region. You know what I mean? So I think that's a question. If they're healthy, we could try and beat around the bush. The Nets are a good basketball team with solid rotation and solid depth. The Miami Heat, great coaching staff, solid rotation. So I don't know if I could say they're the best in the East. I'm like Austin. I definitely see him in the second round because I don't know any different right now. But I also think, I wouldn't be surprised they take the jump to the Eastern Conference Finals. And frankly, I know people tell me I'm nuts. I'm okay with that. If that's their ceiling this year is getting to the conference finals and losing to the Bucks or the Nets or whoever, okay. Like it's year one with James Harden, and most likely he'll be back. Almost definitely likely he's going to be back next year for a full season. As for Doc, we've reached the Brett Brown version of Doc's coaching tenure. Okay, because it's all of us. I mean, I can't go anywhere without someone saying they need to fire Doc. And I'm just like, I agree. There are things that have been frustrating about the way he's coached, but they were number 1 seed last year. And if Ben Simmons is remotely a basketball player in that series, and honestly, if Danny Green doesn't get hurt, they probably are in the conference finals last year. So I'm not closing the door on Doc after 2 years, especially knowing you have a full year next year with James Harden and Joel Embiid, a full training camp. Doc is not going anywhere, nor should he. Can we please stop running coaches out of this town like it's just the cool thing to do? Please.
It'll never stop. Of course it'll never stop. What?
It's unbelievable. It does not. I can't believe it's a year and a half into Doc Rivers, who, by the way, and I know there's a lot of debate about where he is, but he is known as one of the better coaches in NBA history. I'm not saying he should be top 15 but he's been a good coach. Does he have the championships? No, but he's been a good coach. And I think we all need to just chill out for a minute. That's
top 15, Rob. Top 15. All right, let's roll on here.
They should just sign coaches to a 1-year deal so they can then let them go after the first year and change.
It's essentially going to turn into like an NFL situation. Yeah, where
they just disappear one losing streak.
All right, you've got Willie Cauley-Stein in Sixers, blue, red, and white here. Let's talk about the buyout market. I'll start with you, Rob. What's your reaction to Willie Cauley-Stein? What's his impact with the Sixers, and what else do they need?
My reaction to Willie Cauley-Stein is very simple. I don't know. Like, I guess if he could get in there for 10 minutes a game and give you a couple rebounds but I don't know. That's not one that gets me all juiced up. And honestly, that's why I'm glad we have our guy Austin on, because I'm curious if he's hearing anything or what he thinks the Sixers have to do in this buyout market. I personally want the wing. I want a wing guy so that I don't have to watch Furkan. I want the wing guy, but I don't know if they're going to go that route. I just don't know what they're thinking. I just hope it's not what we see now is it, and they don't do anything else to change something around.
What about you, Austin?
Yeah, I would have gone with the wing route. I mean, they only gave the guy a 10-day contract.
Right.
And, so there's obviously room if it doesn't work out. But I would have definitely gone with the wing. They're going to inevitably end up switching a lot of pick and rolls with Harden there. And I think you don't have much defensive versatility or capacity outside of Matisse. So I think if you're switching, inevitably you're too small or you're too slow to not get targeted by more athletic wing duos in the playoffs. So I would have gone with the wing. I like Alfonso McKinney, even though he hasn't done much in his career. I still think that's a guy that maybe can give you something there in just terms of versatility. And the idea of the big man, I think, is more so like you can make a bunch of different guys work with James Harden because of his ability to make lob threats effective. So I feel like your voice or your pool of possible targets expands with James Harden being there because of what he can do. I wouldn't have gone big though. I would have gone with a wing.
That's my fear with this squad. Looking at the Eastern Conference, looking at their potential in the playoffs, like when they're matched up with good perimeter defenders, when they're matched up with good athletes, with length, that is like kind of like the Sixers kryptonite. I mean, you look at I agree, like they need size. You look at the Sixers, they're dead last in offensive rebounding percentage in the NBA.
Great stat right there. I love that stat. That's a great stat. Love
dead
it.
last. The Sixers roll to the basket 8th fewest in the league. So you're going to get that from Willie Cauley-Stein. Hopefully he gets some, fun lobs with him and James Harden. But I agree, Austin. For me, I would have added some athletes to this squad. I think that is what they are absolutely lacking. And the rebounding is a major issue, but you're not going to fix everything in literally 1 or 2 weeks. Like this is a process, and I think next year is going to be where we're like, it's go big or go home. But this year, I think we need to have some realistic expectations. James says, yeah, Rob, you look like you have something to say.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Austin, like, if more guys become available as this buyout market continues, do you think that they're done, or do you think they might be a player for certain guys?
Well, I think like the thing that people kind of neglect in the buyout market philosophy is like 2 things have to happen. Number 1, they have to be a good fit. Number 2, they have to be available. And a lot of guys out there that would be potential buyouts, because there's only 5 or so teams that I think would even consider buying guys out because they're either, out of the play-in picture or they're just flat out tanking at this point. And so there's not a lot of teams there, therefore not a lot of guys that would be available for buyouts. But the guys that are available, a lot of them have significant contracts left this year, and so they might not want to eat a chunk of their own dude money, because why would you? And then if not that, they have significant money coming next year that they don't want to give up or forfeit. Like Derek Favors, everyone was like, Derek Favors. He has a $10 million player option with OKC next year. Would you give up $10 million to play a 10-minute role for the Sixers? No, you probably would. Gary Harris is another one. He's expiring, but he has a $20 million deal. I don't know how much he's already been paid. So theoretically, if he only has like $5 million left on his deal that he's owed for the rest of this season, perhaps he decides, screw it, I'll just take the buyout and go play for a contender. But if not, if he has $10 million or more left that he's owed, why would you take a buyout there? I mean, there's just not it's not a plentiful market for guys. But I mean, there are some wings out there. In my buyout piece, I mentioned Al-Farouq Aminu, who is outright awful. Like not a good player. He's only had 2 seasons in his career where I think he's been above like 35% from 3 in his career. He's played 11 NBA seasons in his career. Been league average roughly or better twice. So not a great shooter, but let's say you look at his previous teams, the Bulls that were bad and the Magic that were bad, and the Blazers that were like mediocre-ish to like okay. Maybe you buy the possibility that he can make an open 3 off when 2 guys are getting doubled, and then he can give you some stuff on the glass. He can switch a little bit defensively. Maybe you buy that. Again, McKinney's a guy that I liked. I mean, these are all guys, and more importantly, these are all guys that are already free agents. So clearly, they don't have a significant market, and therefore, they're going to be cheap.
Yeah. You know who would fit really well with the Sixers, Austin?
Who?
Jordan Nwora.
He would fit great. That was a great pick by me. I love Jordan Nwora, and he is awesome. That guy can shoot the ball. It's fantastic. I love watching him play.
James says not easy to integrate a guy like Harden with Embiid. Yeah, there's gonna be some growing pains for sure.
There's gonna be some growing pains, but I also look at that and go, these are veteran dudes, and at the end of the day, they got to play basketball the way they've always played basketball. Like I know from a schematic standpoint, yeah, there's gonna be growing pains, but at the same time, James, go do what you do. Like in essence, go do what you do, and let's see how it plays out. At least for the next 24 games.
Quinn says the problem with Doc is the offense is not dynamic. It sticks. It lacks movement. This offense is going to get even slower, right, Austin? Like they were among the slowest pace in the NBA before James Harden. That ain't getting any better.
I also think that like we kind of like people just think that Doc does like a lot of stand around offense. They run actions, but they run them quickly. Like you'll see them go through their offense very early in possessions. Like they do a lot of double drag, pick and roll stuff. Horn stuff, but they do it very early in their offense and they don't really recycle that. And then their second look is going to be like an Embiid post up because it's a very efficient look. So that's probably why you don't see much of that. I don't want to say anything about Ennis Freedom. He sucks.
No.
And
my team.
the last thing I need is Nick Adams cheering for Ennis Freedom.
Keep that guy away from the Sixers, please.
Yeah.
How about Kent Bazemore? Any thoughts on Kent Bazemore?
Ennis put him on the bench. No Freedom. Put him on the bench.
All right. Let's roll on to our last question of the night.
This is like we're not getting to a PR nightmare here.
All right. How does James Harden's impact on other players on the Sixers roster? We have a question here or a comment here. I think we need good cutting players, and that's my guy. That the biggest like mystery I have in my head is Matisse Thybulle and his dynamic with cutting to the basket. I mean, he's among I think 98th percentile cutting to the basket, 32 of 37 on cuts to the basket this year. The Sixers yet run, among the fewest cuts in the league. You now have a point guard. You now have a real ball handler, a real playmaker in James Harden. How is that going to impact, a guy like Matisse Thybulle, who I think, he just needs to go from here to here offensively to be a solid player for the Sixers and not make his offense that hindrance on the Sixers offense. So for me, it's Matisse Thybulle, man. I'm really interested to see how James Harden and Matisse Thybulle gel here. So I'll throw it to you, Rob. Who is the guy you're looking at that's going to have, biggest impact with this James Harden addition?
Listen, I'm going to look at Tobias Harris. I mean, I just am. I think, how great would it be if Tobias can gain some confidence from having a little bit more space as guys are getting doubled on the other side, getting to the basket. I mean, I happen to love Tobias when he's downhill, when he's getting the ball and going downhill, when he's not thinking too much about it. That's when I think Tobias is at his best. And right now, like, I love Matisse's defense. So, like, I see what you're saying, but he's so anemic offensively. Mm-hmm. I'm looking for, all right, as these other two guys get a lot of the defensive attention, who's going to score the basketball? We've talked about Tyrese Maxey, but to me, Tobias Harris has to be that third guy now that he was tipping. That's who he was brought here to be in the first place, right? He was brought here to be option number 3. I would love to see him relish in that, having a James Harden and a Joel Embiid, giving him the space to just be the downhill player. And by doing that, be able to knock down a couple threes as well.
Yeah, just real quick before Austin. Here is Matisse Thybulle from the corner this season, 32.6%. You look at Danny Green's impact from the corner 3, much better. So obviously we need a lot more from Matisse Thybulle offensively. We've been saying that for years, but now you have a real, real point guard that can find him getting to the basket. What about you, Austin? Who benefits the most here?
Danny Green is my answer. I think Danny's camp was pretty happy that he was not involved in the Harden trade, and I think they're pretty happy that he was also the trade was made. Period, because they have their point guard now, and I mean Danny is averaging 1.13 points per possession, which is 81st percentile in the NBA on spot ups. So I mean the guy, if you have somebody that can suck in help defenders and rifle it out to the shooter, Danny is that guy. And if he will get them up in bunches. He has like a 3-point rate above 80, which is insane. So he, if Harden is there to bring it to draw to and then kick, they're in good shape. He's in good. Danny's in good shape.
Green's been shooting well since he's come back. People
don't like Danny because he's a spot guy and they don't like what he had to say about.
Exactly. You just took the words right. The only reason the fans in this town want to still give Danny grief is because he tried to defend his teammate. Well, guess what? Danny spoke up a little bit the other day, right? Danny said, "Oh, I don't think he'll play here. He don't like to play in Philly." So Danny is a locker room guy. He knows what he has to do to keep a locker room together. Danny Green is a necessity on this team. And I'm telling you, I will go to my grave believing if he doesn't get hurt against Atlanta, it doesn't matter what 25 did. I believe the Sixers win that series.
I agree.
There is a big anti-Danny Green fan base in this town, 100%. James says, does anyone fear that Simmons could lock up James Harden? Nets fans are chirping. Any thoughts on that, guys?
Isn't he averaging 31 against Ben or something like that?
I would fear that. I would certainly fear that. I think that's a very legitimate concern to have. I mean, the Nets wanted Thibault because they wanted to have 2 Danny Green stoppers. So
I'm sure I've done that before. Hold on, give me 1 second.
I thought that someone had it out there that Harden and I know stats don't tell the whole story. I don't know. I'm just not fully believing that Simmons is going to be all there mentally. And in a playoff series where he's got to play here, I just don't know how he's going to handle it from that side of things. Because the fans aren't going to say, "Oh, let's be nice. He's got things going." No, it is going to be maybe one of the most visceral environments I've seen in Philly. And I'm comparing that to when T.O. came back in a Dallas uniform and all that stuff. I mean, this is a guy who sat out a half a season and held the organization, the fans hostage. It's not good. It's going to be really ugly.
It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome, man. I pray for a 7-game series, man. That would be unbelievable. Quick. Yeah, Austin?
There are like 2 scenarios where I would, if I'm the Nets, I'm like terrified. Number 1 is playing Atlanta in the play-in. If he has to play the Hawks in the play-in and they're just like fouling him like over and over again, if I'm the Nets, I'm legitimately concerned about him falling into like the sunken place, like where like he can't like
the sunken place. Was that a Jordan Peele reference?
I don't know where I got that from actually. That's something where I would be like legitimately terrified of him just having an out of body experience where he just is not like even a functional player. Also, they play the Sixers. I don't even know how many games he would play in that series because he wouldn't want to play in front of the Sixer fans. Someone close to Ben keeps telling me that he doesn't have a problem playing in front of the fans. I'll believe that when I see it. But,
I agree. And Charlie Brown will be in every single minute of that game. Just hack a Ben.
Being like, you go commit 6 fouls in 5 minutes, and we'll pay you an extra 30.
Someone brought up a scenario in which it's like late in a game, and they're going to be fouling Ben in a close game or something. Do you dare mess with it? Does Steve Nash dare mess with the psyche of Ben Simmons, which is obviously, it's very thin, and do a Goran Dragic, Ben Simmons offense, defense sub? Like, does he? Because, schematically, it makes sense, right? But
what if they're just like, Daron Sharp, go trip Ben and roll his ankle, and then he can't play the rest of the game?
Quinn says, I like to see Niang play key minutes. If there's a guy that's going to play late minutes, it's definitely George Niang, right?
No, please God, no, don't let.
No,
it worked against Giannis one time. If they're switching, and you have Niang guarding like Kyrie or Trae Young, or like Derek, or not Derek. Who am I thinking of? DeMar DeRozan. He's going to get devoured. You cannot have George Niang in there.
I don't mind Niang playing key minutes in the sense of playing during the game, but I don't necessarily want him in there at the end of the game. But I think Niang's one of those guys that can shoot off the bench that you're going to have to count on, in the middle of games. I agree. I don't know if I want to see him in there at the end, but I'll take Niang coming off the bench in the middle of games and knock down some shots.
Oh, their bench, man. Their bench is rough. Brian says Simmons is going to relentlessly be heckled, and Philly can't perform in the playoffs. With fans on his side, he might just implode.
Not to mention, it's not like Philly and Brooklyn are that far apart. and it's not like the Brooklyn fan base is this rabid fan base. Do you think there's not going to be a ton of Sixers traveling up the turnpike and going to those? They're going to be there.
Yeah.
Like, they're going to be in Brooklyn to make this guy's life miserable for however long it's.
Ben might have to request to play with like noise canceling AirPods in his ear. You can't hear anything.
Love it, man. All right, that pretty much wraps it up. I'll throw it to you, Austin. Where can we find you, man? What do you got going on, dude?
You can find me in the gutter. No, you can find me on Twitter at NBAkrell. I cover the Sixers on a daily basis for the Painted Lines. I cover the NBA in general for USA Today. I will be having my MVP column coming out soon for USA Today, so be on the lookout for that. You can find me there.
Love it, love it, love it. What about you, Rob?
Find me at Philly_madness. Find me on here with Dibes talking Sixers. We're getting ready for draft. Dibes, we got to do an Eagles show soon because I'm ready to lose it on things, and I'll save it for
what?
If I hear one more person tell me that we got to give Jalen Hurts more time, I'm just gonna scream at this point.
Really?
Russell, you shouldn't waste time with Russell Wilson if you could get him. They're the same people that
it's on par with the fans. Yeah.
They're the same people that said Harrison Barnes and Buddy Hield was the best you could do. So
I was on Facebook the other day. I saw somebody say like, come on, Harden's a sellout. You can't win with Harden. Like, shut the.
Harden's a sellout, but Ben hasn't played.
Yes. We need a Langy podcast on the real estate market. Just all real estate.
Absolutely.
Right now, man, we're rolling. We're rolling in the real estate market.
That's got to be a FINRA. I don't know if it's FINRA, but that would have to be some sort of compliance issue right there.
only issue. Let me just put it to you this way: I hate septic. So if you have septic, we got some stuff to deal with.
Like a septic tank.
Yeah, it's the most annoying thing in the world. Most annoying thing in the world to deal with. Everybody's an expert on it. That's the problem.
That's right.
All right, guys. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at the Painted Lines. Be sure to subscribe.
Russ. Okay, I thought that meant Russell Westbrook to Philly.
No, we don't want Russell.
No, absolutely not.
We want Russell Wilson. Wilson.
I was gonna be like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Hey, you've got an audience there, Rob. You got an audience.
Here's what you need to know: buy now because rates are low. Sell now because people are paying stupid prices for houses. That's it. That's my pod for the day.
And now Rob is going to get investigated by whatever the regulatory term is for governing housing market.
I'm not worried about those guys. All they want to do is take my money. That's all they care about.
All right, guys. Be sure to subscribe. Don't miss any of our content here. Sixers, Eagles, NFL draft, you name it. Just lock it down. Hit that bell. Don't miss any of it. We're rolling with NFL draft content. That's kind of been our theme of Party on Broad. Robbie, we got to get you on here very, very soon and talk draft. But,
yes.
Man, that was a lot of fun, guys. Follow my man Rob on Twitter at Philly_Madness. He is Austin at NBA Krell of USA Today and the Painted Lines. For Rob, for Austin, for myself, stay awesome, everyone.